This happened when I was 12. It was summer break, so I was taking full advantage of staying up way past my bedtime. My parents and little brother were fast asleep, and I was alone in my bedroom with the door closed, lying on my bed watching random YouTube videos on my iPad. My bed was pushed against the wall, and I was facing out toward my room. It must have been around 3 in the morning. I remember checking the time not long before it happened and thinking I should probably go to sleep soon, but you know how it is when you fall into those YouTube rabbit holes. Just one more video turned into several more. I wasn't tired at all. That's important because I know some people might think I was half asleep or dreaming, but I wasn't. I was wide awake, the brightness of my iPad screen keeping any drowsiness at bay. My room was completely dark except for the glow from my device, and the house was absolutely silent. Then it happened, without any warning at all. A woman just appeared in the middle of my bedroom. She didn't walk in or gradually materialize. She was simply there, as if she'd always been standing there, and I just hadn't noticed her until that moment. The woman was wearing this old-fashioned dress, like something straight out of the Victorian era. It was puffy, with lots of fabric. I think it might have been white or light-colored, but it was hard to tell because of the glow. She was holding an umbrella, which struck me as really odd. Who holds an umbrella indoors? But the most shocking thing about her wasn't her clothes or the umbrella. It was that she was made entirely of light, not like she was carrying a light source or had a glow around her. She was the light. Her entire form was composed of this dense, cloud-like white light that was incredibly bright, but somehow didn't hurt my eyes to look at. It wasn't like looking at a light bulb. It was softer, but intense enough to illuminate my entire bedroom. I could still make out her features, though. She had this serene expression on her face, and she was just standing there, looking in my general direction, but not directly at me. The weirdest part of all? I wasn't scared, not even a little bit. I should have been terrified. A glowing woman suddenly appearing in my bedroom in the middle of the night. That's straight out of a horror movie. But instead, I felt this strange sense of calm wash over me. I was surprised, yes, but not afraid. It was almost like my brain recognized her somehow, even though I'd never seen her before. She only stayed for a few seconds, maybe 5 or 6 at most. Then she vanished as suddenly as she'd appeared. She didn't fade away or walk out. She was just gone in an instant, leaving my room in darkness again except for my iPad screen. I sat there for a while, trying to process what had just happened. I pinched myself to make sure I was awake. I even got up and turned on my light, half expecting to see her again, but my room was empty. Everything was normal. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept my light on until morning, not out of fear, but because I was hoping she might come back. I wanted to see her again, to understand what had happened. The next morning I told my mom about it over breakfast. I remember her face, that look parents get when they're trying to be supportive, but clearly think you're making something up or had a vivid dream. "That sounds like a very interesting dream, honey," she said, pouring me a glass of orange juice. "It wasn't a dream, Mom. I was wide awake, I swear." She just nodded and changed the subject. I could tell she didn't believe me, and I didn't push it. Even at 12, I understood how crazy it sounded. For years after that, I barely thought about the glowing woman. It was like my brain had filed the experience away somewhere deep, and I rarely accessed that memory. When I did think about it, I started wondering if maybe I had dreamed it after all, or if my eyes had played tricks on me. But then, about 4 years later, my mom and I were having one of those deep mother-daughter talks. I was 16 by then, going through typical teenage stuff, and somehow we got onto the topic of spiritual things. Out of nowhere, she asked, "Do you remember that time when you were younger, when you said you saw a woman made of light in your room?" I was shocked that she remembered. "Yeah, I do." "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about that over the years. Maybe it was your guardian angel checking in on you. I stared at her. You believe me now? She shrugged. I don't know what you saw, sweetheart, but I believe you saw something, and you weren't scared by it, which tells me it wasn't anything bad. That conversation opened something up in me. I started thinking about the glowing woman more frequently, trying to remember every detail of those few seconds. The Victorian dress, the umbrella, the calm feeling that came over me. Was she really a guardian angel, a ghost, something else entirely? But here's where it gets even weirder. Every time I considered telling someone else about my experience, a friend, a boyfriend, anyone, I felt this strong reluctance wash over me. It was like a voice inside was warning me to keep quiet about it, not out of fear, but almost like it was a secret I was supposed to keep, like the experience was meant for me alone. This reluctance has stayed with me all these years. In fact, writing this post is the first time I've shared this story with anyone other than my mom. Even now, there's a part of me that's uncomfortable doing it, like I'm breaking some unspoken rule. Sometimes I wonder about the significance of her appearance. Why the old-fashioned dress? Why was she holding an umbrella? Our house wasn't particularly old. It was built in the 90s. So I don't think she was the ghost of someone who lived there long ago. And if she was my guardian angel, why show herself that one time and never again? I've had a few other strange experiences over the years, but nothing like that night. Small things, items moving when no one was home, the feeling of being watched when I was alone, my name being called when no one was there, but nothing as clear and undeniable as the glowing woman. A couple years ago, I did some research on our neighborhood's history, wondering if maybe our house was built on land that had some significance in the Victorian era. I found out that there used to be a small settlement nearby in the mid-1800s, but nothing directly where our subdivision now stands. Still, it made me wonder if maybe the woman I saw was somehow connected to that settlement. The umbrella detail has always puzzled me the most. It wasn't raining that night. Not even cloudy as far as I can remember. Was it symbolic of something? Protection, maybe. I've read that umbrellas can represent shelter or guardianship in some cultures. If she really was my guardian angel, maybe that was her way of showing me she was protecting me. I'm 22 now, and I've tried to find scientific explanations for what I saw. Sleep paralysis doesn't fit because I was fully awake and could move. Hallucinations are possible, I guess, but I wasn't sick or on any medications, and I've never hallucinated before or since. The most logical explanation would be that my eyes were playing tricks on me after staring at a bright screen in a dark room, but that doesn't explain the level of detail I saw or the emotional response I had. The truth is, I don't think there is a scientific explanation. Some experiences just defy our understanding of the world, and I think this was one of them. I still feel that strange reluctance about sharing this story, even now. It's like I'm betraying a confidence somehow. But I also feel like I need answers, or at least to know if anyone else has experienced something similar. What strikes me most when I look back on that night isn't the visual of the woman herself, though that was certainly striking. It's the absolute certainty I felt in that moment that I was in the presence of something, someone, benevolent. In those few seconds, I felt completely safe and protected in a way I've rarely felt since. Sometimes, when I'm going through a tough time, I think about her, and that feeling comes back, just a little. Maybe that was the point of her visit. Not to scare me or deliver some cryptic message, but just to let me know that I'm not alone, that something is watching over me. Or maybe it was a random blip in reality, a momentary thinning of whatever separates our world from whatever comes next. I don't know. All I know is that it happened. I was wide awake, and to this day, I can't explain it. Has anyone else ever experienced something like this, a visitation that didn't feel threatening, but left you with more questions than answers? I'd really like to know I'm not alone in this. Story 16. I've never really believed in ghosts. Even as a kid, I was always the one laughing during scary movies while my friends hid under blankets. That changed last summer when I was 16. Now I'm lying awake at night wondering if something followed me home. My family had just moved to this small town in Pennsylvania because my dad got transferred. It was one of those places where everyone knows everyone, and as the new girl, I stuck out like a sore thumb. We were staying at this extended stay hotel while house hunting, and from my window, I could literally see a funeral home across the street. Talk about a warm welcome, right? Starting at a new school mid-semester sucked. I was that awkward girl, eating lunch alone, until Jessica approached me in the cafeteria about 3 weeks in. She wasn't exactly part of the popular crowd, more like that quiet girl who always wore the same oversized hoodie and constantly smelled like weed. But she was nice to me when no one else was, so we started hanging out. One day after school, Jessica mentioned she lived in this old Victorian house that her dad had inherited from his grandparents. "Everyone in town thinks it's haunted," she said with this weird pride in her voice. "Want to come over and smoke? My dad works late on Thursdays." I wasn't really into weed, but I was desperate for friends, so I agreed. Her house was exactly what you'd expect, one of those massive old homes with peeling paint and a wraparound porch that creaked when you walked on it. It was the kind of place that looks beautiful in old photographs, but just seems sad and forgotten now. Inside was worse. The wallpaper was this faded floral pattern, and everything smelled musty, like old books. Jessica's room was on the second floor, at the end of a long hallway with these weird old portraits watching you as you walked by. I'm not kidding. Their eyes seemed to follow you. "Don't mind the mess," she said, kicking aside some clothes as we entered her room. It was actually pretty cool. String lights hanging from the ceiling, band posters covering the walls, and this ancient record player that she swore sounded better than digital. We smoked, listened to music, and for the first time since moving, I felt like maybe this town wouldn't be so bad. That's when I noticed this door in her room. It looked different from her closet door, smaller and painted a different color. "Where does that go?" I asked. Jessica's whole demeanor changed. She suddenly looked uncomfortable. "It's just this weird space between my room and my dad's. We don't use it." "Why not? Seems like a waste of space." She shrugged, trying to act casual. "It's always locked anyway. My dad says the floor isn't safe." Something about the way she said it made me think there was more to the story, but I didn't push it. We went back to talking about music and school drama. It wasn't until my second visit, about a week later, that things got weird. Jessica had gone downstairs to grab us some snacks, and I was alone in her room, flipping through a magazine on her bed. That's when I heard it, this loud buzzing right by my ear. I swatted at it, thinking it was a fly or something, but there was nothing there. The buzzing continued, getting louder, like it was circling around my head. I jumped up, frantically looking around, but couldn't see anything. It sounded like a massive bee or wasp, but there was nothing there. The sound followed me as I moved across the room. Jessica walked in to find me standing in the middle of her room, frantically swatting at the air. "What are you doing?" she asked, putting down the chips and sodas she'd brought up. "Don't you hear that?" I asked, still waving my hands around my head. "That buzzing?" Her face went pale. She put the snacks down and walked to her window, gesturing for me to come look. The window was one of those old-fashioned ones with the wooden frame and small square panes. Between the outer and inner panes, there were dozens, maybe hundreds, of dead bees. "They get trapped in there somehow," she said quietly. "We clean them out every spring, but they always come back." "But I heard buzzing," I insisted, "like right next to my ear." Jessica just nodded. "It happens sometimes. You get used to it." I didn't like how casually she said that, like hearing invisible insects was a normal thing, but I didn't want to seem like a wuss, so I tried to shake it off. We smoked again, and I convinced myself it was just the weed making me paranoid. The third time I visited her house was when everything went to hell. It was a Friday night, and Jessica's dad was supposed to be at some work dinner until late. We were in her room, listening to music and laughing about this stupid teacher we both had for English. I was in the middle of telling her this dirty joke about our principal when we heard it. 3 loud, distinct knocks on her bedroom door. Not like someone knocking to come in, but 3 slow, deliberate knocks that seemed to vibrate through the room. We both froze. The music was still playing, but it suddenly seemed very far away. Jessica looked at me with wide eyes, her face drained of color. "Is that your dad?" I whispered, suddenly terrified that he'd come home early and heard me making inappropriate jokes. She shook her head slowly. "He always calls out when he gets home." She stood up and walked toward the door, her hands shaking as she reached for the knob. I wanted to tell her not to open it, but my mouth felt dry, and the words wouldn't come out. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Jessica opened the door. The hallway was empty. "Dad?" she called out, her voice echoing through the house. No response. She looked back at me, then stepped out into the hallway. I followed, not wanting to be left alone in her room. We checked every room upstairs, all empty. We went downstairs and checked the entire first floor. No one there. The front and back doors were still locked from the inside. "Maybe it was just the house settling," I suggested, trying to sound rational even though my voice was shaking. Jessica shook her head. "This house is over 100 years old. I know what it sounds like when it settles. That was someone knocking." We went back upstairs, and I noticed she was careful to keep her distance from that mysterious locked door between her room and her dad's. When we got back to her room, the temperature had dropped dramatically. It was like walking into a freezer. Our breath was visible in little puffs of vapor. "What the fuck?" I whispered, wrapping my arms around myself. It had been perfectly normal temperature just minutes before. "It happens sometimes," Jessica said, grabbing a hoodie from her closet and tossing me one too. "The heating in this place is ancient." But I could tell from her face that this wasn't normal. She was scared too. We tried to go back to hanging out, but the mood was ruined. I kept glancing at her door, expecting to hear those knocks again. Jessica turned the music up louder, like she was trying to drown out any other sounds the house might make. About 20 minutes later, we both jumped at the sound of the front door opening and closing, followed by Jessica's dad calling out, "I'm home!" The relief I felt was overwhelming. I almost laughed. Whatever had knocked on her door, at least now we weren't alone in the house. But then Jessica looked at me, her face serious. "Don't tell my dad about the knocking," she whispered urgently. "He gets weird about that stuff." I nodded, though I was curious why. When her dad came upstairs to say hello, he seemed like a normal, friendly guy. He asked if we wanted pizza for dinner, and I ended up staying. Throughout the evening, I noticed how both Jessica and her dad seemed to avoid even looking at that part of the hallway where the locked room was. After dinner, Jessica's dad offered to drive me home. As we were leaving, I glanced back up at the house. In Jessica's window, I swear I saw a silhouette of someone standing there, watching us leave. But Jessica was right next to me, getting into the car. I almost said something, but stopped myself. Maybe it was just a shadow or my imagination, but deep down, I knew what I'd seen. The drive to my hotel was quiet. As we pulled up, Jessica's dad suddenly turned to me. "Jade, has Jessica told you much about our house?" My stomach dropped. "Just that it's old," I said carefully. He nodded slowly. "It's been in our family for generations. Has character, but it's a good home." He paused, then added, "You're always welcome, but maybe next time you girls can hang out at the mall or something." I didn't need to be told twice. I thanked him for the ride and practically ran inside the hotel. From my window, I could see the funeral home across the street, and for the first time, it wasn't the creepiest building in town anymore. Jessica and I still hang out at school, but I've made excuses every time she's invited me over. She hasn't pushed it, which makes me think she understands. Sometimes in class, I catch her staring out the window with this vacant look, like she's somewhere else entirely. Last week, she mentioned offhandedly that the buzzing in her room has gotten worse, and she's been sleeping on the couch downstairs. I wanted to ask more, but couldn't bring myself to. Some questions are better left unanswered. I still don't know what was in that locked room or what knocked on her door that day. Part of me doesn't want to know, but sometimes when it's really quiet, I swear I can still hear that buzzing near my ear. And at night, just as I'm falling asleep, I find myself waiting, dreading the sound of 3 slow knocks.